how legal is this for the president who speaks publicly for all Americans to choose if they want to listen to him or not? Now this is, barricaded access only to people who pay. And as you mentioned, the rumor is $60,000 to $100,000 a month. Now for high frequency trading firms who will profit on this, that's not a lot of money, right? But to you and me, it is a lot of money.
More than 10 customers have already signed up to a new offer from Truth Social. It gives them access to posts from President Trump before anyone else, though it does cost as much as $100,000 a month. The move is controversial because it could give traders access to market-moving posts from President Trump before others know about them. We've already seen countless examples of Donald Trump announcing major policies on his social media site, Truth Social, such as on tariffs, on trade negotiations, the future of the Strait of Hormuz, etc., all of which do move the markets. Well, let's speak to Dr. Harry G. Broadman, former Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisers under President George H.W. Bush. Good evening to you, Dr. Broadman.
How are you, Carol?
I'm very well, delighted to have you with us. What do you make of this plan?
Well, I'm tempted to say it's extraordinary, but I got to tell you, sitting here in Washington, looking at the conduct of Mr. Trump, it's no longer extraordinary, but it's really quite alarming in the sense that he's charging these prices. This is the president of the United States uttering things, whether it's on True Social or X or just in live on a microphone, where certain classes of people are going to hear this before others because they've paid money. That strikes me as quite problematic, and I suspect that the Congress, not necessarily so much the Republicans, but the Democrats, I think, may well have a field day with this. And I think, the question is, how legal is this for the president who speaks publicly for all Americans to choose if they want to listen to him or not? Now this is, barricaded access only to people who pay. And as you mentioned, the rumor is $60,000 to $100,000 a month. Now for high frequency trading firms who will profit on this, that's not a lot of money, right? But to you and me, it is a lot of money.
And I mean, here in the UK, we have laws against what's known as insider trading, which is traders who bet on the markets and make money out of it because they've got inside information on what's happening. This seems to be a way of actually just legitimizing that entire practice.
It is to some extent. I think the difference is that this is a question of timing, so that if you pay, whatever the price tag is, you hear it before other people. It's not necessarily we don't know. It's not necessarily that other people won't know, but the trading firms will have it before others have it. So it's not necessarily, at least from what you understand, it's not he's giving exclusive information to some parties and no parties will be aware of it. But who knows?
I mean, to be clear, the money that people pay to get this service, it doesn't go directly into Donald Trump's pocket. It goes into his revocable trust, which holds his assets while he is in office. But when you look at this, I mean, it comes against a backdrop where there have been concerns, haven't there, about big bets on the markets just before the announcements of things like tariffs and questions over how people knew when to make those bets and whether they had inside information.
Right. And again, I think this happens with any government, frankly, that some people will be able to get information before others. And it's all a question, at least in the United States, of what White House staffers say. In this particular case, this is not the White House staff. This is the president posting, on social media. So it's quite an extreme example. So, we'll see what happens. I suspect that the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives on the Democratic side will have something to say about this. Whether they will be able to override any Republicans who say, well, let's just let this go, we'll see. But for the leader of the so-called free world, other countries are watching us, as they always have, Mr. Trump, and they're saying, so now the guy is going to profit Even if it's an irrevocable trust, he's going to profit by giving certain information to certain parties before other parties get it. Again, this is, I've said this many times, but this is quite extraordinary.
Is he allowed to do this? I mean, here in the UK, as I mentioned earlier, I think there might be a bit of an outcry if the leader of the government, of course, we have a prime minister, not a president, yet doesn't have quite the same powers. He has a thing called Parliament that he's got to that are going to limit his movements. But I mean, is President Trump able to do this? Because it does seem to be saying, look, that you can make announcements, which the sort of announcements that only a US president can make about global tariffs, about the next steps in international wars and so on. And he's now setting up a scheme to ensure that some traders, and he himself, of course, can profit from this.
Right. And I think the real issue is this differential pricing, and you can pay a lot more, and you will get that information before anybody else does. Now, whether that goes before a court, we'll see who brings this case. But there are laws, there are statutory laws. So, for instance, let's say a high frequency firm says, yeah, I see the price tag $60,000 to $100,000, but Mr. President, we're willing to give you $500,000 if you give it to us very quickly. That may well border on sort of bribery, right? And so the question is transparency. The question is how equal it is across the population. What kind of differential favors are going to be won as a result of paying a higher price than what's on the menu, what's on the price of the entree. We're in uncharted territory, it seems to me, and it's not a happy territory to be uncharted in.
Yeah, I mean, when you were chief of staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors under President George H.W. Bush, I guess you wouldn't have had Truth Social in those years. But could you ever imagine President Bush coming up with a scheme like this?
No, but these are very different personalities. But I can tell you when you work in government, whether it's in the White House or in the legislative branch, you have government ethics laws that bind you to certain kinds of conduct, and those are taken pretty seriously. But now you have the person in the Oval Office who says, well, this is not really me. This is a firm, and it's through a trust and so forth. So I'm not really going to profit. Well, he may not profit immediately, but he will certainly profit, once he exits office. So, whether his heirs get the money, we just don't know. But it doesn't taste good, and it doesn't smell very good.
It's been great to talk to you. Dr. Harry G. Broadman, former Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Carol.